Hi everybody, in this video we're going to get started working on form validation. And we're going to start by mainly just working on the HTML and CSS to make sure that we have all of that in place before we really start digging into the JavaScript. So, need to first make some adjustments to the HTML, including setting up these validations, these attributes that will validate our form fields. So, let's open up the code, which I have here, and make the necessary adjustments. So there's a good chance you remember how to make something required. You just use the required Boolean attribute, which means it doesn't need a value. So we can just paste that in for each of the inputs. Now, for this, you might forget what is the attribute that we use for a minimum number and maximum number of characters? Well, in that case, I recommend looking it up on MDN. You can search MDN input, and that will take you to the article on input elements. And for any HTML element, you can it should list the attributes that are available for it. And if you just dig through the list, eventually you'll see, oh, there's min length and max length, and the L is not capitalized. So it doesn't use camel case, which is a source of confusion. I've confused it plenty of times. So let's see, we're on the caption. We need min length 2, and I'm pretty sure it should be in quotes, and max length of 30. And then we can go to the other elements and give them the appropriate values. That one's supposed to be maximum of 200. This is maximum of 40. And the only other thing we're missing is the image link field must contain a valid URL. So go down to your image link input, and if you don't have type equals URL, insert that now. And oops, that should not be there. So this is what will validate that it is indeed a URL. After this, we need to update the markup by adding elements to display the error messages. Include one element per input, one error element per input element. The elements should not be visible unless the corresponding form field is invalid. Use the browser's default error messages. Okay, so what can we use here? Well, I would probably go with a span tag, although you could argue for using a different element, I'm sure, but span tag makes sense to me here. And we will give it a class. I'll call it modal double underscore error, so it's an element of the modal block. And I'm just going to put in some error text here, just so we can see it, because we're just going to work on getting it styled, at least somewhat. We might not get all the styles in place, but we want to make sure that it's visible. Now, note that I put it inside the label. I think that'll probably work out best for us. You could do it otherwise. And this isn't the last we've seen of these span tags. We'll have to be coming back here and making some adjustments a little bit later. But here we are. And now's a good time to go to the browser. This is, yep, port 5555. Well, we can see them, these error messages, right? There's something a bit weird where they're like on the same line as these other elements. That's because span tags are inline elements. And so to prevent that, well, there's a couple ways that we could do it. I don't know if maybe just giving display block to the modal error class will work. We can try that first. So let's open the CSS, and I'll put this right after the input styles. And we will try display block and see if that resolves that issue. Yep, that resolved that issue. And I'm just gonna do color red. I know this isn't exactly what it is supposed to be, so you should make sure to do the correct color and font sizes. To do, use correct color and font sizes. So it's closer, but the main problem that I'm seeing now is that there should not be this much space here, and there should be space between these elements, right? Well, let's take a close look at the Figma. Compare these two here, and note first that yes, there's a difference in height in these two modals. So that was the designer included that, so you don't have to ensure that it's the same height. In fact, you wouldn't be able to ensure that it's the same height, really. There wouldn't be quite enough space, especially since some of these are two lines, some of the error messages. So we don't need to worry about that, but what we should worry about is when there's no error messages, there needs to be 32 pixels between these two elements, the two inputs, and 32 pixels between the last input and the button, which is currently what we had, or what we had before we started messing around with it. And you can see that we still have that 32 pixel bottom margin here on the inputs. When there's an error message, note that we still have this 32 pixel margin in both cases. The difference is that it's between the error message and the button, or the error message and the inputs. But we can use that. So currently, what do we have? We have the margin bottom is on the input elements, right? If we move the margin bottom to the labels, then I think that's actually going to resolve a lot of this. So let's set the margin bottom to 0 on the input elements, like that. And then go to the label and set that same margin bottom of 32 pixels on the label. Now, it did nothing. And the reason for that is we actually need to turn the label into display block if we want to use margin on it, because it is some sort of inline element. So we've got that 32 pixels distance between this, the error message, and this, when the error message is visible. We just need, was it 8 pixels? 8 pixels between the input element and the error, which we could do with, well, we don't want to do it here. We don't want to do margin bottom on the input, because then it'll always be there and we'll wind up with 40 pixels when the error message is not present. So we would want to do it here. So margin top 8 pixels. So now I think these distances are correct. And let's add that to VS Code. If I can remember what we did, this one needed margin top 8 pixels, and then the input, set the bottom margin to 0 and give bottom margin 32 to the label. And is that also display block to the label is what I forgot. Okay. And let's just verify that it still looks correct when the errors are invisible. And we could do that by just typing visibility hidden. Visibility hidden. No, just using visibility hidden isn't going to do the trick, because that, now there's too much space here. What we need to look at is if there's no text in it. because that is going to be the invisible state, whether it's visible or not visible. So if we just remove the text, we can see that there is indeed 32 pixels between these elements as it is supposed to be when there's no error message. So that that's good. We have the basic CSS in place for the error messages, or at least most of it. There are some details that you still need to do. So the next step is, let's just get rid of all these error texts, because we have verified that if there's text in here, it will be visible for us. That's mainly what we wanted to make sure. So I just did a quick search and replace. You can just replace them all by hand, or however you like to do it. Now we are back to no error messages. Okay. What else do we need to do in terms of styling? Well, we are going to need some styles for a disabled button, and we are going to need some styles for this outline here. But I'm actually going to the red outline. I'm going to leave that until the next video, one of the next videos when we start working on the JavaScript, because it'll make a little more sense how how those are being applied if I explain them then. So this is all that we're doing for now. We got a little bit of the prep work out of the way, and in the next video we are going to start writing some JavaScript.